The smell of silver always came first, not the clean metallic scent of jewelry or coins, but something darker, burnt flesh mixed with despair. The specific odor of a toxin designed to kill her kind, slowly and with precision. After 5 years, Serafina Ashford could identify silver by scent. Alone could detect it in concentrations so minute that even specialized equipment would miss it. Her body had learned to fear that smell, the way prey animals learn to fear predator musk, the way trauma survivors learn to fear specific sounds or textures that triggered memories of violence. For 47 seconds on November 16th, she died. Not metaphorically, not nearly died or felt like dying. She died. Clinical death, cardiac arrest, zero heartbeat, zero brain activity. The monitors flatlined and stayed flat for 47 seconds. That would later define everything: the number that appeared in her nightmares in random license plates in digital clocks at exactly 11:47 p.m. when insomnia kept her awake and counting. But in those 47 seconds of absolute darkness, her hybrid DNA suppressed for 1,847 days, beaten down by silver and drugs and systematic torture, made a choice that shouldn't have been biologically possible. It refused to accept extinction. Her cells didn't just restart, they evolved, adapted, transformed her from victim into something the world had never seen, something Dr. Isolde Cross's research had accidentally created while trying to save her dying husband, a hybrid who had learned to survive the unsurvivable, who had been refined by suffering into a weapon that would eventually turn on its makers. This is the story of that transformation, of how Subject 246 became Serafina Ashford again, of how systematic torture designed to break her instead forged her into something unbreakable. But first, she had to die. Day 1847 of captivity. The cell measured 12 feet by 12 feet, 144 square feet of white hell that had been Serafina's entire universe since she was 20 years old. White walls that reflected fluorescent light with painful intensity, creating an environment of constant glare that made sleep nearly impossible. White floor, smooth concrete, sealed with industrial epoxy that was cold enough to numb bare feet within minutes. White ceiling with 4 fluorescent fixtures humming at a frequency that lived somewhere between sound and sensation, vibrating in her bones until she thought madness might be preferable to one more second of that endless drone. One drain in the corner, no toilet, no sink, just a plastic bucket replaced daily by guards who never spoke, never acknowledged her humanity, treated her like livestock requiring minimal maintenance. One metal shelf bolted to the wall, her bed with no mattress, no blanket, nothing but cold steel that drew heat from her body like a vampire drawing blood. And the collar, always the collar. 2 inches of silver reinforced steel circling her throat etched with symbols she'd memorized during endless hours of having nothing else to study, flowing runes or decorative cruelty she'd never know which. The collar burned, every second of every minute, of every hour of every day. For 5 years, it burned against her skin with low-grade agony that never stopped, never dulled, never allowed her nervous system to adapt or ignore. The burning had left permanent damage, a band of scar tissue encircling her throat like a necklace of pain, discolored and rough, marking her as owned, even if the collar were somehow removed. The scar would never fade. She would carry this brand forever, visible evidence of 1,847 days of captivity. But worse than the physical pain was what the collar did to her wolf. She couldn't feel her other half anymore. The companion that should have been as natural as breathing, the partnership between human and animal that defined what it meant to be a shifter, gone. Buried so deep that sometimes she wondered if that part of her had died, if only the broken human remained. Serafina sat on the metal shelf now, feet dangling above the cold floor, conserving what little body heat she had. 25 years old chronologically, 40 in appearance, gaunt face, sunken eyes, skin the color of something that had forgotten sunlight existed. Her dark hair, hung limp past her shoulders, unwashed for weeks, because they only allowed bathing once monthly with cold water and harsh soap. She looked like a ghost, felt like one too. The lock disengaged with its distinctive metallic click, the sound that triggered immediate physiological response. Heart rate spiked, adrenaline dumped, muscles tensed. 5 years of Pavlovian conditioning had wired that response so deeply she couldn't control it. Couldn't stop her body from preparing for pain, even when she knew panic was useless. Click meant needles. Click meant cutting. Click meant breaking. The door opened with its pneumatic hiss, releasing the pressure seal that kept the cell at exactly 62 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to be uncomfortable constantly, but not cold enough to kill a perfect temperature for maintaining a living specimen in perpetual low-grade hypothermia. Dr. Isolde Cross entered with the confidence of someone who'd never known, fear, never been vulnerable, never spent one moment at another person's mercy. 58, but looking younger, silver hair in an immaculate bun, white lab coat over designer clothing that cost more than most people earned in months. She carried a metal tray with 3 syringes, amber, red, and silver. 2 orderlies flanked her, large men with dead eyes who'd made peace with being complicit in torture, who'd found ways to compartmentalize their actions so they could sleep at night despite knowing they were monsters. "Good morning, 246, Dr. Cross said in her cultured Boston accent. "How are we feeling today?" Serafina said nothing. Speaking was pointless. Strong and silent as always. Dr. Cross smiled without warmth. "Do you know how many subjects we tested before you two? 145. All dead, most within hours. But you've survived 5 years, 1,847 days. Do you know why?" Silence. "Because you're a hybrid," Dr. Cross continued, answering her own rhetorical question. "Human mother, wolf father. 1 in 10 million births. Your body can process both human and wolf DNA simultaneously, something that should be biologically impossible." An orderly grabbed Serafina's arm without warning, yanking it straight. She didn't resist. Resistance only made it worse. The first needle pierced her inner elbow. Cold burn flooded her bloodstream, spreading up her arm like ice water injected directly into her veins. The drug hit like a sledgehammer. Vision blurred, muscles seized, her back arched involuntarily as every fiber of her body went rigid. She tried to breathe, but her lungs wouldn't cooperate. "It means," Dr. Cross continued clinically, "your blood can cure my husband. Senator Victor Cross has hemolytic anemia. His body destroys its own red blood cells. Traditional medicine can't help. Wolf blood would kill him. But your hybrid blood that bridges the gap." The second injection came without warning, sliding into her other arm. This one burned like liquid fire, like molten metal flowing through her veins. Sweat broke out despite the cold. Her heart hammered against her wrists, beating so fast she thought it might explode. "More than that," Dr. Cross said, voice taking on reverent quality. "It can make him immortal. A human with a wolf's healing factor, enhanced strength, centuries of life, and it's all possible because of you." The third syringe, the largest, silver-tinted liquid that caught the light and threw it back in fractured patterns. "This is the final test," Dr. Cross said softly. "Pure silver nitrate at 1200 parts per million. For reference, 200 is lethal to most shifters. 800 would kill ancient alphas. 1200 is unprecedented. If you survive this, we'll know your adaptation is complete. Victor can be saved." She positioned the needle with surgical precision aimed directly at Serafina's heart. "And you will have served your purpose." The needle pierced her chest. The plunger depressed. Silver nitrate entered her heart. For 47 seconds, Serafina Ashford ceased to exist. The equipment recorded everything with mechanical precision. Heart rate dropping 60, 50, 40, 30, 20, 10, 5, 3, 2, 1, 0. Flatline, the single sustained tone that meant biological death. Dr. Cross checked her watch. Time of death 11:47 p.m. Subject 246 expired during final trial. Duration of survival 5 years, 2 months, 17 days. Remarkable but insufficient. She stripped off her gloves. Prepare the body for disposal. Forest burial northern sector. Contact Portland facility. Subject 247 needs immediate acceleration to primary status. The orderlies nodded, following procedures they'd performed dozens of times. Behind them, something impossible began. Deep in Serafina's cellular structure, her hybrid DNA pushed beyond every biological limit made a choice. Stem cells activated with fierce urgency. Damaged tissue regenerated at impossible speeds. The silver nitrate was isolated, encapsulated by newly evolved antibodies. Her heart gave one weak flutter, then another. The pauses shortened. 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2. By the time orderlies returned 15 minutes later with a body bag, Serafina's heart beat steadily at 42 per minute. Her lungs drew shallow breaths. Her brain sparked with renewed electrical activity. She kept her eyes half closed, kept her breathing imperceptible. Perfect corpse stillness even as every nerve screamed with the agony of resurrection. She heard them talking. Shame. This one lasted longer than most. Don't get sentimental. They're not really people once they're in the program, just biological resources. What about 247? Still in Portland, younger only 18, docs optimistic. Riven. They were talking about Riven, subject 247, 18 years old. The girl in the next cell who Serafina had whispered encouragement to, through air vents, had shared food rations with, had promised a rescue would come. That promise burned hotter than silver ever had. They zipped her into the body bag, loaded her into a vehicle, drove for 20 minutes on rough roads. Finally they stopped. Cold November air rushed in when they opened the doors. Jesus, it's freezing. Let's make this quick. Yeah, I have got the Portland facility shift tomorrow morning. They carried her 50 yards, then threw her into what felt like a ravine. She tumbled down a steep slope, the bag tearing on rocks, her body taking brutal impacts. She bit her tongue to keep from crying out, tasting copper. She hit bottom hard, lay still, heard them walking away, their voices fading. Think anything will eat her with that much silver in her system. Animals can smell poison. She'll be gone by spring. Just bones. Engine started. Headlights swept the trees. Sound of vehicle pulling away. Silence. Serafina counted to 100 before moving. Then she tore the bag wider, pulled herself out into cold rain and forest darkness. She tried to stand. Her legs buckled immediately. Muscles atrophied from years of minimal use. She went down, hard, caught herself on a rock, cutting her palms. She crawled instead, hands and knees in mud, pulling forward inch by inch. Made it maybe 100 yards before her body gave out completely. She collapsed at the base of a willow tree, curled into a ball, shivering violently. Hypothermia setting in fast. Maybe dying wasn't so bad. At least she'd die free. At least she'd die as Serafina Ashford, instead of subject 246. She closed her eyes. Then she heard it cutting through rain and dying consciousness. A wolf's howl, not attack or territory. Searching, calling. Is anyone there? Serafina wanted to respond but had no strength for transformation, no voice left for calling. She could only lie there and hope. The howl came closer, then closer still. Heavy footsteps. Something massive arriving. A man's voice, deep and shocked. What in God's name? Strong hands touching her face, gently checking for pulse with unexpected tenderness. Warmth radiating from him like a furnace werewolf metabolism, running hot enough to drive back the cold, killing her. No, you don't get to die. Not here. Not on my land. Stay with me. Serafina managed to open her eyes. Through rain and failing vision, she saw him. Tall, powerfully built, eyes glowing amber gold wolf pushed close to the surface. Dark hair plastered to his skull. Tactical gear soaked through. He looked like an avenging angel. "Don't let them take me back," she whispered. "Please, the White Room." "I've got you," he said, and his voice was the first truly gentle thing she'd heard in 5 years. "You're safe now. On my life, no one touches you again. I swear it." He lifted her, cradling her against his chest. The heat radiating from him felt like salvation. She pressed her face against his chest and felt something impossible, safe. "There's a symbol burned into your shoulder," he said, voice going hard. "Two-headed eagle. I know that symbol. Cross family crest. The crosses are my enemies." He knew. He recognized them. "My name is Caden Thornfield, Alpha of the Obsidian Pack. Whatever they did to you, I will make them pay." He was speaking into a comm device. "Marcus, I need medical now. Get Evander prepped for emergency surgery. I'm bringing someone in, my mate." Mate. The word echoed impossibly. For the first time in 1,847 days, Serafina let herself hope. Then darkness claimed her completely. The Thornfield estate rose from Washington forest glass and steel, reflecting trees, while asserting dominance. Caden crashed through doors carrying his burden. The mate bond had snapped into place the moment he touched her, and now he could feel her dying through their connection. "Medical wing now," he roared. His brother Dr. Evander Thornfield was ready. 28, one of the youngest board-certified surgeons in the state. He took one look and his professional calm cracked. Jesus Christ, what did they do to her? Cross Industries. Caden laid her on the surgical table with infinite care. "She was dead when I found her. Actually dead. Somehow she came back. I've got her." Evander moved immediately, barking orders to nurses. Equipment beeped to life. Monitors showed catastrophic numbers. Heart rate 42 and irregular. Blood pressure 60/40. Core temperature 28.3 Celsius. Oxygen saturation 72%. Every number screamed dying. Caden forced himself to step back to the observation window, though. Every instinct demanded he stay beside her. Then they cut away her clothing and the full damage revealed itself. Caden, Evander said, voice tight with fury. "You need to see this." Caden entered and felt rage unlike anything he'd known. Burns covered 18% of her body in perfect geometric patterns, deliberate brands. 4th degree in places burned to bone. Scars layered over each other like a palimpsest of pain. "Look at this X-ray," Evander said quietly. 47 fractures, all healed. Someone broke her, systematically testing regeneration capacity. He pointed to another scan. Something metallic near her heart, grain of rice size. Could be a tracker, could be a kill switch filled with silver. If they activate it, she bleeds out in seconds. "Remove it," Caden said with alpha certainty. "I don't care about the risk. If we leave it, they can kill her anytime. The surgery might kill her. Maybe 20% survival odds. And if we don't, they can execute her remotely whenever they want. Then we take the chance. I'll donate blood. Use as much as needed." "She's not pack. She's my mate," Caden interrupted with absolute authority. "That makes her pack. Do whatever it takes to save her." Evander nodded, already moving. "Then we move fast. She's crashing." The surgery took 8 hours and 43 minutes. Caden stood at the observation window, for all of it refusing to leave, bearing witness to every moment. He watched as Evander cut through tissue to reach the subclavian artery, watched the delicate extraction that took over an hour because one wrong move would sever the artery. He watched as her heart arrested at hour 4, the defibrillator shocking her back to rhythm once, twice, 3 times. He watched as they finally removed the device's sophisticated technology connected to silver nitrate designed for remote assassination. Dawn broke when Evander emerged exhausted. "She's stable. Barely. Lost her twice on the table. But she's a fighter. The silver is neutralized. Tracker is out. We have removed the collar. It was chemically bonded to her skin, required laser removal." Maybe 35% chance of surviving the next 24 hours. He pulled out a tablet. But Caden, she's been systematically tortured for years. I'm estimating 5 years minimum, based on scarring patterns. Her wolf is suppressed so deeply, I can barely sense it might never fully return. And psychologically, PTSD, depression, attachment issues. Recovery will take years, maybe decades. This isn't rescue and recovery. This is lifelong healing. I don't care how long it takes, Caden said. I want the best trauma specialists, therapists, physical therapists. Everything she needs. Already on it, Evander showed him a list. But there's more. I ran her DNA. She's a natural hybrid. 1 in 10 million. Do you understand what that means? That's why they took her, Caden said, pieces clicking together. The Crosses researched genetic modification. They needed a natural hybrid to study, to figure out how to give humans wolf abilities without rejection. Exactly. Her body tells a story of systematic torture over 5 years. They tested everything: regeneration, pain tolerance, tissue viability. They extracted blood, bone marrow, cerebrospinal fluid tissue from every organ, treated her worse than research animals. Caden's fist went through the observation window, glass spider-webbed. His knuckles split, but he didn't care. The Crosses, Senator Victor Cross and Dr. Isolde Cross. I've known they were dirty for years, but could never prove it. You can't go after a senator without ironclad proof, Evander warned. Then we'll get it. When she wakes, we'll ask everything. Document it all. Build a case so airtight they can't escape. We'll expose them publicly. Make sure they face justice. Make sure they can never do this again. How long until she wakes? Could be hours, could be days. I've induced a medical coma to let her heal. We'll bring her out slowly over 12 to 24 hours. Then I'll wait, Caden said, settling beside her bed. However long it takes. And he did wait. For 72 hours, Caden barely left the medical wing. He slept in the chair beside her bed, ate meals brought by pack members, ran his business from his laptop while never moving more than 10 feet from her side. The mate bond grew stronger hourly. He could feel her fighting to survive, even in unconsciousness, refusing to give up. On the morning of day 3, Evander began bringing her out of the coma, reducing sedation gradually, monitoring brain activity carefully. At 2:13 p.m., exactly 73 hours after Caden carried her through those doors, Serafina Ashford opened her eyes and screamed. Her scream tore through the medical wing like something primal being ripped from the earth. 5 years of suppressed agony, finally finding voice. Her body convulsed upward, despite IV lines and monitoring equipment, hands clawing at her throat with desperate violence, seeking a collar that was no longer there, but whose phantom burn still registered in nerve endings that couldn't accept its absence. The monitors shrieked in alarm, heart rate spiking to 140, blood pressure surging, oxygen saturation plummeting as hyperventilation made her dizzy. Easy, easy, Caden said, catching her wrists before she could tear the surgical repairs on her neck, before she could damage the delicate healing that Evander had spent 8 hours creating. His touch triggered immediate violent response. She jerked away with strength that shouldn't have been possible 3 days, post-op eyes wild and unfocused, seeing not a medical suite, but somewhere else entirely. You're safe. You're in Thornfield territory. No one can hurt you here. Let me go. Her voice was raw, damaged from intubation and years of screaming that had accomplished nothing except teaching her that screaming was pointless. Please, I'll cooperate. I'll be good. Just don't. Her voice broke on a sob that sounded like it was being torn from somewhere deep. Don't put me back in the White Room. Please, Dr. Cross. Please, I'll do better. The name Dr. Cross hit Caden like a physical blow. Confirmation. The crest had suggested it. Her injuries had implied it. But hearing her speak that name with such terror solidified his rage into something cold and purposeful. There is no White Room here, Caden said steadily, keeping his voice level despite fury boiling through him, despite wanting to shift and hunt and tear apart everyone responsible. Look at me. Really look. Where are you? It took long seconds for Serafina's panic to recede enough that her eyes could focus on present reality instead of remembered horror. Her breathing was ragged, each inhale sounding like it hurt, each exhale shaking. But gradually, she began processing what she actually saw instead of what trauma insisted she should be seeing. Not white walls reflecting harsh fluorescent glare, warm earth tones, sage green walls, natural wood accents colors, chosen specifically to be calming rather than clinical, not artificial lights burning into retinas, natural daylight streaming through actual windows, real windows that showed forest and sky and clouds moving across blue expanse, windows that proved the world outside still existed, not cold metal shelf. A proper hospital bed with pillows and blankets that looked soft instead of utilitarian, that suggested comfort mattered here, not restraints. Just monitoring equipment and IV lines that she could remove herself if she wanted that were there to help rather than control. Her hands trembled as they moved from her throat to the blanket, covering her fingers, curling into the fabric like she needed to confirm it was real, needed tactile proof that this wasn't another hallucination or cruel trick. "You're in the Thornfield Estate's medical wing," Caden continued, his voice. The first gentle thing she'd heard in so long, she'd forgotten what kindness sounded like, what it felt like to be spoken to as a person rather than a specimen. "My name is Caden Thornfield, Alpha of the Obsidian Pack. I found you 3 nights ago dying in the forest, hypothermic, silver poisoned, nearly gone. We brought you here. My brother Evander performed emergency surgery, removed the kill switch they implanted near your heart, treated the silver toxicity as much as medically possible, surgically removed the collar that was chemically bonded to your skin. You've been in a medically induced coma for 72 hours while your body healed enough to safely regain consciousness." She studied him with eyes that had learned trust was dangerous, that kindness was usually prelude to cruelty, that hope was the cruelest torture because disappointment hurt worse than any physical pain. Her amber eyes, dulled by malnutrition and trauma but still holding fierce intelligence, searched his face for deception, for the trap she was certain existed because 5 years had taught her that safety was always an illusion. Why? The single word carried the weight of 1,847 days of suffering, of being reduced to a number of learning that her pain meant nothing to anyone. Why save me? What do you want from me? It was the question of someone who'd learned that rescue always came with price tags, that help was never free, that people only kept you alive when you were useful. Because you needed saving, Caden said simply, without the elaborate justifications she'd learned to expect, without the speeches about greater good or necessary sacrifice. Because no one deserves what was done to you. Because seeing someone dying and choosing to walk away would make me the monster instead of them. And because... He hesitated, unsure how to explain something that defied rational explanation, something that existed beyond choice or decision. "Because you're my mate, the bond snapped into place the moment I touched you in that forest, like lightning to the chest, like recognition on a soul-deep level. You're mine to protect now if you'll accept that. If you don't want the bond, we can discuss options when you're stronger, when you're not in a hospital bed, 3 days post-surgery. But right now, regardless of the mate bond, you're under my pack's protection. That's not negotiable. That's not conditional. You're safe here. Period. Mate." She tested the word like it was in a foreign language, like the concept was so alien she couldn't quite grasp it. Her brow furrowed in confusion that bordered on disbelief. "I can't be anyone's mate. I'm broken, ruined. I'm Subject 246. I'm contaminated, damaged goods. I'm your Serafina Ashford," Caden interrupted firmly, his voice carrying alpha authority that made the words feel like undeniable truth rather than opinion. "That's the name you gave me when I found you before you lost consciousness. You whispered it like you were afraid you'd forget it, like saying it out loud made it real again. You're a person with a name and a history and an identity that belongs to you, not a number, not a designation, not a piece of laboratory equipment. A person, someone who survived 5 years of systematic torture and came out the other side still fighting, still alive, still human, despite everything they did to try to take that away. That's not broken, Serafina. That's extraordinary. That's strength most people can't even comprehend. For the first time in 1847 days, someone had spoken her name without mockery, without cruelty, without reducing her to less than human in the same breath. The sound of it, Serafina Moto 246, not the subject, not it, made her throat tight with emotion. She thought was dead with feelings she'd buried so deep, she'd convinced herself they were gone forever. Her hands moved to her throat again, fingers tracing the bandages, covering where the collar had been, where 5 years of chemical burning had destroyed tissue and nerve endings, where scar tissue would remain forever as evidence of captivity. The collar was gone, actually gone, not just temporarily removed for some procedure that would end with it being locked back in place. Gone. How much do you remember? Caden asked, gently pulling a chair closer to the bed, but not touching her, giving her space while making his presence available if she wanted it. About what happened to you, about who took you, and why. I know this is hard. I know you just woke up after major surgery, but anything you can tell us would help. We're trying to build a case against the people who did this. We want to make sure they can't do it to anyone else. And so Serafina told him about Silver Creek Pack, a small territory in Oregon that had been her home for 20 years, destroyed 5 years ago by what everyone assumed was a rogue attack, but what she now knew was targeted elimination. About being the only survivor because she was valuable 1 in 10 million, Dr. Cross had said. About being taken to an underground facility whose location she'd never seen, transported while unconscious, waking in the white room that would be her entire universe for the next 5 years. She told him about Dr. Isolde Cross, brilliant, cold, utterly convinced that the end justified any means. About how Cross explained on that first day that Serafina had been chosen for something important, something that would change the world, something that required sacrifice, but would ultimately save countless lives. How Cross had made it sound like an honor instead of a death sentence. She told him about the collar locked around her throat within the first hour, the burning starting immediately and never stopping, the way it suppressed her wolf so completely that within weeks she couldn't feel that other half of herself anymore, couldn't sense the partnership that should have been as natural as breathing. She told him about the tests that started on day 1 and continued at every single day for 5 years without exception. Blood draws, so many blood draws, sometimes multiple times daily, until she was chronically anemic and dizzy. Tissue biopsies taken from various organs, harvesting samples to study how hybrid cells functioned, bone marrow aspirations from her hips, and sternum and spine, the thick needle pushing into bone while she was awake because they wanted to measure her pain response, wanted to document how long it took for the injection sites to heal. She told him about systematic bone breaking. They'd fracture her ribs or arms or legs with precise force, then document healing times with serial x-rays, measuring how many days until the bone knit back together, testing if healing speed changed based on nutrition levels or stress or other variables. About how they'd break the same bone multiple times to see if healing got faster or slower with repeated injury to the same site. She told him about the Burns-heated metal instruments pressed to her skin in geometric patterns, creating brands that served no purpose except to test how much damage hybrid tissue could sustain before scarring became permanent, before regeneration failed completely. About how they'd burned the same spot multiple times, layering new burns over old scars, documenting the progression from acute injury to chronic damage. Senator Victor Cross has acute hemolytic anemia. Serafina explained, her voice flat with the emotional detachment that trauma survivors use to discuss their own suffering, the dissociation that let her speak about torture like it had happened to someone else. His body destroys its own red blood cells faster than his bone marrow can produce them. It's genetic, progressive, eventually fatal. Traditional medicine Can't help they've tried everything. Blood transfusions only work temporarily. Immune suppressants leave him vulnerable to every infection. Bone marrow transplants have failed multiple times. She pulled the blanket tighter around herself, suddenly cold despite the room being warm. Wolf blood would cure it. The enhanced healing factor would override the genetic defect. But wolf blood is toxic to humans. Direct transfusion causes catastrophic immune response, multiple organ failure within minutes. Dr. Cross tried it once on an early subject. The man died in 4 minutes, screaming the entire time. Her voice dropped to barely above whisper. But hybrid blood, my blood bridges the gap. Human and wolf genetics coexisting naturally in one body. My blood could cure Senator Cross without killing him. Could give him wolf healing, wolf strength, wolf longevity. All while keeping his human mind intact. Could make him essentially immortal, living for centuries instead of decades, healing from injuries that would kill normal humans, never aging past a certain point. So they tortured you for 5 years to save a dying politician, Caden said, and his voice had gone cold with fury. That promised violence, that spoke of retribution that would be neither quick nor merciful. Not just me, Serafina said, and this part hurt worse than anything they'd done to her body, worse than the breaking and the burning and the endless violation. There were others, so many others. Dr. Cross told me about them. Sometimes I think she enjoyed having someone to brag to about her research, someone who couldn't tell anyone. They couldn't judge or couldn't do anything except listen. She said I was subject 246, which means 245 before you. Caden finished, his jaw clenched so tight, the muscle jumped. 245 people who died for this research. Most within hours, Serafina confirmed. Their bodies couldn't handle the genetic incompatibility. The human and wolf DNA fought each other at the cellular level, created proteins that attacked the host organism, triggered immune responses that caused organ failure. A few lasted days. One lasted almost a month before her organs liquefied. Dr. Cross seemed almost fond of that one, said she learned so much from that subject's slow deterioration. She met Caden's eyes and he saw the guilt there, the survivor's remorse that made no logical sense, but existed anyway. I'm the only one who survived long term, 5 years. Because I'm a natural hybrid, born this way, instead of created artificially. My body had already solved the compatibility problem naturally, through pure genetic chance. That made me valuable. That's why they kept me alive when all the others died. I was the template they needed, the baseline to understand how human-wolf integration could work. And there's another, Shiku continued urgency, creeping into her voice, hands gripping the blanket so hard her knuckles went white. Subject 247, Riven. That's her real name, she told me through the air vents between our cells when guards weren't listening. 18 years old. She'd been there 3 months when I died. Scared but trying to be brave. I gave her food, when I could whispered encouragement, promised her that rescue would come, that someone would save us. She grabbed Caden's arm with desperate strength. You have to get her out. She's at the Portland facility. Dr. Cross mentioned it multiple times, said they were accelerating Riven to primary test status after I died. Underground complex beneath a pharmaceutical plant. Heavy security. If they suspect rescue, they'll kill everyone and destroy the evidence. They have protocols for that. Dr. Cross was very proud of their contingency planning. Please. I survived because I am stubborn and lucky and apparently hard to kill. But Revenge is just a kid. She doesn't deserve this. None of them deserved this. We will get her out, Caden promised, and the certainty in his voice made it feel like fact rather than hope. But we do it smart. If we go in guns blazing, they kill the hostages and vanish before we can stop them. We need evidence first, documentation, witnesses, financial records, something that builds an airtight case. We expose them publicly, so they can't bury it in classified files or national security exemptions. We make it impossible for them to hide. Then we extract every surviving victim and make sure the Crosses face justice, both supernatural justice through the Council of Alphas and human justice through the courts. "De how?" Serafina asked, and the word carried the weight of 5 years learning that powerful people didn't face consequences, that money and connections could bury any crime, that justice was a fairy tale for people who'd never experienced true injustice. They're connected at every level: government, military, supernatural, community. Senator Cross has allies in Congress, in the Pentagon, in the Alpha Council itself. Dr. Cross has published. Research has government contracts, is respected in the scientific community. They've built legitimacy as cover for illegal work. How do you fight that? By being smarter and more prepared, Caden said. By documenting everything you remember, every name, every face, every detail about the facility layout. By following the money. Financial crimes always leave traces even when people think they've covered their tracks. By finding other victims or their families. 245 people didn't disappear without someone missing them. By building a case so overwhelming that even their powerful friends can't protect them. He leaned forward, his dark eyes intense with determination. And by making you strong again, because the most powerful evidence isn't documentation, it's you. A living victim who can testify to what happened, who survived what should have been unsurvivable, whose very existence proves their crimes. They tried to destroy you. Instead, they created a witness they can't silence and can't discredit. Your survival is their worst nightmare. For the first time in 5 years, Serafina felt something other than despair or resignation, or the grinding determination to simply survive one more day. She felt purpose. Direction. The possibility that her suffering could mean something beyond just her own story. "What do I do?" she asked. "Right now, you heal," Caden said firmly. "You let your body recover from surgery and silver poisoning and 5 years of systematic abuse. You eat real food and sleep in a real bed and remember what it feels like to be safe. You work with therapists who specialize in trauma recovery. You let yourself be human again instead of just surviving. And when you're ready, when you're strong enough, then we plan how to destroy them." "How long?" Serafina asked. "How long until I'm strong enough?" Caden glanced at the door where Evander had appeared, having heard the latter part of the conversation. "That depends entirely on you," Evander said, entering with a tablet full of medical charts. "Your body is healing faster than should be medically possible. Your hybrid genetics are working in your favor. The surgical wounds are already showing signs of accelerated healing. Silver toxicity is clearing from your system ahead of schedule. But physical healing is only part of recovery. The psychological trauma that's going to take longer. Maybe years, maybe decades. There's no timeline for healing from 5 years of systematic torture." "Then we start now," Serafina said, her voice taking on an edge of steel that hadn't been there before, determination that came from having survived the worst and deciding that surviving wasn't enough anymore. She wanted to live. "What do I need to do?" Day 1, learning to stand. The first morning after Serafina decided to stop being a victim and start being a survivor, she fell. Her legs simply gave out when she tried to stand, muscles atrophied from 5 years of minimal use, buckling like rotten wood under weight they couldn't support. She went down hard, knees hitting the floor with a crack that probably hurt more than it should have, but that she barely felt through the determination burning in her chest. Caden moved immediately to help, but Serafina held up a trembling hand that stopped him mid-motion. "No," she said, voice rough but firm. "I do this myself." She had been weak for 1,847 days, had been helpless, dependent, controlled, had been subject to 46, a thing to be moved and positioned and manipulated by others. She would not be that anymore. Serafina braced her hands against cold tile and pushed. Her arms shook violently, muscles screaming protest, but inch by inch she raised herself. First to hands and knees, then, using the bed frame for support, slowly, painfully to her feet. She stood there swaying like a drunk, legs trembling so badly, she thought they might give out again any second. But she was standing, on her own power, without assistance, without permission. "Good," Caden said from where he'd stopped several feet away, respecting her need for autonomy, while staying close enough to catch her if she fell. "Very good. Tomorrow you'll stand longer. The day after you'll walk, then run, then hunt. We'll get you back to full strength one day at a time. You set the pace. You decide when you're ready for the next step. I won't just hunt, Serafina said, still swaying, but refusing to sit down, refusing to accept that standing for 30 seconds was her limit. I'll fight. I'll destroy them. I'll make sure they can never do this to anyone else. Then let's begin. Caden replied something that might have been pride flickering in his dark eyes. Day 2. 53 steps. Serafina made it 53 steps before collapsing, counted each one, marking progress in concrete numbers rather than vague feelings, needing quantifiable evidence that she was getting stronger instead of weaker. 53 steps from her hospital bed to the doorway of the medical suite. Tomorrow she'd make it to 60, then 70, then 100. She would rebuild herself one step at a time, one day at a time, with the same systematic precision that Cross Industries had used to destroy her. But where they'd used their precision for destruction, she'd use hers for reconstruction. Evander watched this with increasing fascination, making notes on his tablet about recovery rates that shouldn't be possible. Your cellular regeneration is accelerating, he told her that evening while checking her vital signs and reviewing blood work. Not just healing at shifter rates, healing faster than any shifter I've documented. Your hybrid DNA seems to be expressing more strongly now than when you arrived. Like your body is overcompensating for 5 years of suppression, like it's making up for lost time. Good, Serafina said flatly. I'll need every advantage I can get. Day 3. Refusing the wheelchair. On day 3, Serafina refused the wheelchair entirely. It's 40 feet to the library, Evander said reasonably. You're 3 days post-op. There's no shame in using assistance. I know, Serafina said, gripping the doorframe for support. But I spent 5 years having zero choice about anything. Every meal, every bath, every moment of every day was controlled by someone else. Now I have choices, and I choose to walk. It took 40 minutes to cover that 40 feet, but she did it. Walked into the library on her own power, collapsed into an armchair with muscles screaming, and felt more accomplished than she had in 5 years. Caden found her there an hour later, sitting in sunlight streaming through windows, crying silently while touching real books and remembering what it felt like to be human instead of just alive. He didn't say anything, just sat in the chair across from her within reach if she needed him, but not crowding, not demanding explanation or emotional processing, or anything except her company. They sat like that for 3 hours, Serafina processing 5 years of trauma in a space that felt safe enough to break down Caden, providing silent support that didn't require performance or pretense. It was the first time in 1,847 days that Serafina cried in front of someone without fear, without calculation, without wondering how her emotional display would be used against her. It felt like freedom. Day 7 running by day 7. Serafina was jogging. Not fast, not far, but jogging. Around the estate grounds, with Caden beside her, matching her pace instead of setting his own, letting her body discover what it could do. Instead of pushing her past limits, she was still mapping. This is medically impossible. Evander told Caden that evening, showing him comparative charts of her progress versus typical recovery trajectories. She should still be in bed, instead she's running. Her cellular regeneration rates are off every chart I have. Her muscle regrowth is happening in days instead of weeks. It's like her body is evolving in real time, adapting to her will to recover. I have never seen anything like it. She's motivated, Caden said simply, though he knew it went deeper than motivation. The mate bond let him feel her determination like a physical force iron will wrapped around trauma, refusing to let suffering define her, choosing strength over victimhood with every conscious decision. It's more than motivation, Evander insisted. Her hybrid markers are expressing more strongly every day. Her DNA is actively changing. I can see it in the genetic sequencing. She's becoming something more than she was. The Crosses wanted to create enhanced soldiers. They never realized they were creating one. Day 10, the first shift, day 10, brought the milestone that would change everything. In the forest clearing at dawn, Caden worked patiently with Serafina while morning mist clung to the ground and birds began their daily chorus. "Close your eyes," he instructed gently. "Breathe. Don't force anything. Just invite her in. Your wolf. She's you. She's been buried for 5 years, but she's still there. She never left. She was just sleeping, waiting for the collar to come off, waiting for permission to exist again." Serafina closed her eyes and breathed deeply, drawing in forest air that smelled of pine and earth and growing things. For the first time in 1,847 days, there was no silver burning her throat, no suppression forcing her wolf down into darkness. And she felt her, not a whisper or a distant echo, a presence, real and solid and angry and joyful and alive. "Sister," her wolf said, voice like coming home after years away. "You remember me." "I never forgot." Serafina thought back, feeling tears streaming down her face as the partnership she thought was dead reformed like bones knitting back together. "Not once, not ever. I knew you were there even when I couldn't feel you. Then let me out." Her wolf has said, "Let me run, let me hunt, let me be free." The shift came without pain, bones reforming like water instead of breaking muscles, restructuring like flowing instead of tearing. The transformation that should have hurt like dying instead felt like being born, like becoming whole instead of remaining half. When it finished, a wolf stood where Serafina had been, pure white fur that seemed to glow in the morning light, smaller than pure-blooded wolves, built for speed and agility instead of power. Amber eyes that held intelligence that went beyond animal instinct. And around her was an aura of power. Alpha power which shouldn't be possible for someone, not alpha-born, not pack-raised, not trained from childhood in dominance. Caden had shifted to meet her his massive black wolf, dwarfing her smaller frame, but treating her as equal rather than subordinate. He touched his muzzle to hers in greeting, in recognition, in welcome. Serafina threw her head back and howled. Pure joy, pure freedom, pure defiance of everything that had tried to break her. The sound echoed through Thornfield Forest, and throughout the estate pack, members added their voices, creating a chorus that welcomed her home, that celebrated survival, that promised protection. Caden joined her, creating a duet of mate bond and pack acceptance. When they returned to human form an hour later, Caden pulled her into his arms and spoke words he'd been holding for 10 days. "I love you," he said, the declaration simple and direct and absolutely sincere. "I know it's fast. I know you've only been here 10 days. I know you need time to heal and decide what you want without pressure. I'm not asking you to say it back. I'm not demanding you accept the bond fully. I just need you to know you're not alone anymore. You're not just surviving anymore. You're mine if you want to be. And I'm yours regardless of whether you want me." Serafina looked up at him. This man who'd saved her life, who'd protected her without asking for anything in return, who'd given her space to heal without pressure or expectation, or demands that she perform gratitude or reciprocate feelings she might not have. "I'm not whole yet," she said honestly, because honesty felt safer than pretense, because 5 years of lies made truth precious. "I'm still broken in ways that might never completely heal. I have nightmares every night, wake up screaming, thinking I'm back in the white room. I can't stand being in small spaces. Had a panic attack in the elevator yesterday. Touch sometimes feels like violence even when I know logically it's not. I might never be what you need in a mate. Might never be capable of normal relationship things. Might always be more damaged than partner. You're exactly what I need," Caden said firmly, cupping her face with hands that were gentle despite their strength. "Broken pieces and all, nightmares and panic attacks and boundaries that might never change, that's fine. We'll heal together at whatever pace you need. No pressure, no expectations, no timeline, just us figuring it out as we go, however that looks, for however long it takes." She kissed him then, tentative and careful and full of hope that maybe she could have this. Maybe she deserved softness after so much cruelty. Maybe broken things could still be loved. "I love you too," she whispered against his lips. "And I'm ready. Ready to fight. Ready to save Riven. Ready to make the crosses pay for every single thing they did to all 246 of us." "Then tomorrow we plan," Caden said, pulling her closer. "And then we go to war." Day 14. The intelligence that changed everything 2 days later. Marcus Vane burst into Caden's office at 3 a.m. with news that would reshape their entire strategy. "We found something," Marcus said, spreading satellite imagery and intercepted communications across Caden's desk. "Cross Industries is moving Subject 247 in 48 hours. 3 armored vehicles, 20 guards, Highway 12 through the Cascades." Serafina, who'd been sleeping in Caden's room, nightmares were worse when she was alone, appeared in the doorway wearing one of Caden's shirts, instantly alert. "That's Riven. They're moving Riven." "That's our window," Marcus confirmed. "But there's more. Winter Gala in 2 days at the Seattle Grand Hotel. Dr. Isolde Cross is unveiling Project Genesis to international buyers. Live demonstrations on 17 subjects, including the real 247. Serafina's blood went cold. "Live demonstrations. You mean she's showcasing the research publicly?" Marcus said grimly. Invitations went to defense ministers, pharmaceutical CEOs, private military contractors. Starting bid is $10 billion for exclusive rights to the technology. And after the demonstration, they'll terminate all witnesses. Serafina finished understanding the protocol because Dr. Cross had explained it, once explaining contingency plans like she was discussing weather. Kill the subjects, destroy the evidence, vanish the research into classified programs where no one can investigate, standard procedure for black ops projects when exposure risk gets too high. "Then we don't hit the convoy," Caden said, strategy clicking into place with the certainty that came from years of tactical planning. "That's probably a trap anyway. They know Sera's alive, probably suspect rescue attempts. But the gala, that's different. Public venue with international media covering the event because a senator's wife is hosting. Security heavy, but not expecting infiltration from inside. Cameras everywhere recording everything. 200 witnesses who can't all be silenced. If we expose her, they're exposed Project Genesis. With the whole world watching in real time, she can't bury it. Can't kill the evidence because the evidence will be broadcast live to every major news network. Security will be massive," Marcus warned, ever the voice of caution. "Cross Industries private security, Seattle PD, probably FP given the international attendees. If they catch you, we don't fight our way in." Serafina interrupted, understanding forming as she thought through the approach. "We blend. I'm living proof of her research. I know things no one outside that facility could know. Get me on that stage during her presentation. Let me speak before she can stop me and her empire collapses in real time. She can't deny me. Can't explain me away. Can't kill me without proving everything I say is true." "You'd be exposed," Caden said quietly. "Everyone would know what happened to you. No privacy, no anonymity. Your trauma becomes public record. News outlets would hound you for interviews. Your name and face would be everywhere. Are you ready for that?" Serafina thought about Riven, about the 245 who died before her, about whoever might be Subject 248 if they didn't stop this now. "Yes," she said with absolute certainty. "I'm ready." The next 48 hours preparation. They had 2 days to prepare for an infiltration that would either end Cross Industries or get them all killed. Day 1 was tactical planning and presence training. "You need to own the room," Caden explained, working with Serafina in the estate's ballroom. 200 powerful people who are used to being the most important person in any space. You need to make them believe you instantly need to command attention without triggering defensive responses. Serafina practiced her opening line 100 times. Subject 246 reporting for duty. Not aggressive, not defensive, just factual with the weight of truth behind it. She learned to control her alpha aura, the power that shouldn't exist but did, until she could project authority without dominance, could make people listen without making them feel threatened. Day 2 was contingencies and backup plans. Isolde will have personal security, Marcus said, pointing to blueprints of the hotel. Minimum 20 guards. Exits here, here and here. If things go bad, we improvise, Serafina said. But they won't go bad. She'll want to prove I'm lying. She's too arrogant to just shoot me. She'll try to discredit me first. That gives us time. And if she releases the subjects as weapons? Marcus asked. The failed experiments she keeps alive for emergencies. Serafina smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. Then I show her what 5 years of torture created. What happens when you take someone with alpha potential and refine them through systematic suffering? I can control them. I know I can. My wolf told me. Evander provided one final insurance policy, a tiny audio recorder disguised as jewelry that would capture everything and upload to cloud storage in real time. Whatever happens, Evander said, we'll have documentation. Even if everything goes wrong, even if they somehow bury the public exposure, we'll have evidence that can't be destroyed. The night before the gala, Serafina stood on her balcony, looking at stars she thought she'd never see again, and Evander found her there. What if I freeze when I see her? Serafina asked quietly. What if I get up there and can't speak? What if 5 years of conditioning kicks in and I become 246 again instead of Serafina Ashford? Then Caden will speak for you, Evander said simply. Then Marcos will release the documentation we've been building. Then the pack will fight our way out and we'll find another approach. But Sarah, you won't freeze. You know how I know. How? Because Subject 246 was alone, had no choices, no agency, no power. But Serafina Ashford has a mate who loves her, has a pack who accepts her, has 17 people in that facility counting on her, has 245 dead who need justice. You're not alone anymore, and that makes all the difference. Serafina nodded, resolution hardening into something unbreakable. You're right. Time to show them what they created when they tried to break me. Time to prove that torture doesn't create victims, it creates warriors. Then let's go to war, Evander said. Tomorrow everything would change. Tomorrow Cross Industries would fall. Tomorrow Serafina Ashford would stop being the victim and become the reckoning. The Seattle Grand Hotel rose from downtown like a monument to wealth and power, 40 stories of glass and steel, reflecting city lights, a beacon for the world's elite who gathered here tonight to witness what Dr. Isolde Cross promised would be the future of human evolution. None of them suspected they were actually attending the unveiling of an empire built on mass murder. Serafina stood in a service corridor adjacent to the grand ballroom, adjusting the black wig that concealed her distinctive dark hair, checking that the silver gown chosen specifically because it transformed her from victim to something elegant and untouchable hung properly. The masquerade mask covered the upper half of her face, obscuring her features, while the makeup artist had spent 2 hours making her look healthy instead of like someone 3 weeks out of a medically induced coma. She looked nothing like Subject 246. She looked like she belonged here, like she was just another wealthy attendee at an exclusive event. That was exactly the point. Last chance to back out, Caden said, beside her devastating in a custom tuxedo that made him look like old money instead of the alpha of the Pacific Northwest's most powerful pack. His dark eyes held concern mixed with pride, love mixed with worry. Once we walk through those doors, there's no going back. You'll be exposed. Your face, your story, your trauma, it all becomes public record. Are you absolutely certain? Serafina met his gaze steadily, her voice calm despite her racing heart. I've been vulnerable for 1,847 days. Tonight I choose to be visible. Tonight I take back the narrative they tried to write for me. Tonight I stop being the victim and become the witness. Let's end this. She touched the small recorder hidden in her necklace, Evander's insurance policy already transmitting to secure servers that would preserve everything even if the worst happened. Then she touched the silver dagger strapped to her thigh beneath the gown, Cadence insurance policy just in case words weren't enough. They entered through a side entrance that Marcos had identified as having the lightest security blending seamlessly with late arrivals. Security was heavy, but not expecting infiltration guards checking invitations, but not really looking at faces, focused on preventing external threats rather than internal exposure. The forged invitation that Marcus had created passed inspection without question. Mr. and Mrs. Thornfield, representing Thornfield Industries' interest in biotechnology investments. Perfectly legitimate, perfectly boring, perfectly forgettable. The ballroom took Serafina's breath away. Despite everything, the sheer opulence of it was almost obscene. Crystal chandeliers the size of compact cars hung from a ceiling painted with classical frescoes. Each fixture, probably worth more than her entire pack's territory, had been valued at. Marble floors, polished to mirror brightness, reflected everything, doubling the visual impact. Silk drapes in deep burgundy framed floor-to-ceiling windows, offering views of Seattle's skyline, glittering in the darkness. Everything elegant, everything civilized, everything perfect, everything a lie that covered systematic torture and mass murder. They found seats near the center, not too close to raise suspicion, not too far back to be ineffective. Around them, conversations hummed with the particular energy of people who wielded serious power discussing how to acquire more. Defense ministers in military dress uniforms discussing applications for enhanced soldiers. CEOs of pharmaceutical companies calculating profit margins on life extension treatments. Private military contractors imagining armies that couldn't be killed through conventional means. All of them willing to pay billions for technology built on the corpses of children. Serafina felt rage burning cold in her chest, felt her wolf stirring just beneath her skin. Felt the alpha power she'd somehow developed, wanting to explode outward and dominate everyone in this room. But she held it back, channeled it, focused it. Control was more important than power. Precision was more valuable than strength. Wait for the right moment. Wait for maximum impact. Wait until the whole world was watching. The lights dimmed, slightly theatrical lighting, designed to draw attention to the stage where the Isolde Cross now stood at an elegant podium looking every inch the visionary scientist in white designer suit with silver accents that probably cost more than most people's cars. Her hair was perfect. Her makeup was flawless. She looked like someone who belonged in textbooks. As an example of human achievement, she looked nothing like the monster who'd spent 5 years systematically torturing people to death. Ladies and gentlemen, Isolde's cultured voice carried perfectly through the sound system, projected with the confidence of someone who'd given presentations to Congress and the United Nations. Thank you for joining us tonight. I know many of you have traveled great distances to be here, have cleared busy schedules to attend, have kept this appointment despite not knowing exactly what you'd be witnessing. I appreciate your trust and your patience. Tonight, that trust will be rewarded. The screens behind her lit up with the Cross Industries logo, a two-headed eagle that Serafina recognized from the brand, burned into her shoulder from 5 years of seeing it on every piece of equipment, every uniform, every document. For 20 years, Isolde continued her voice, taking on the passionate intensity of a true believer describing their holy mission. Cross Industries has been pursuing a dream that humanity has chased since the dawn of civilization, the dream of transcending our biological limitations, of becoming more than evolution designed us to be, of taking control of our own destiny instead of accepting the genetic hand we were dealt. If the screens changed, showing sanitized footage of the research test subjects in clean white rooms receiving injections, bodies transforming with what looked like minimal discomfort, enhanced individuals performing impossible feats of strength and speed. Professional cinematography made torture look like triumph, made systematic murder look like scientific progress. Nothing showed the screaming, nothing showed the dying, nothing showed the 245 bodies that preceded every success. I present to you Project Genesis, Isolde said, spreading her arms like a prophet revealing divine truth. The culmination of 2 decades of research, billions of dollars in investment and breakthroughs that will fundamentally change what it means to be human. We have solved the problem of human-wolf genetic integration. We can give normal humans the abilities of shifters, enhanced healing, increased strength and speed, extended lifespan, without the wolf itself, without pack bonds or mate bonds or any of the cultural limitations that make shifters difficult to deploy in military or corporate contexts. The crowd murmured with interest, with excitement, with the particular energy of powerful people, recognizing an opportunity to become more powerful. Imagine, Isolde continued, her voice dropping to something almost seductive. A world where disease is obsolete, where aging can be reversed, where soldiers can survive injuries that would kill normal humans, can operate without food or sleep for days, can be deployed indefinitely without the psychological toll that breaks conventional forces. Where CEOs can work for centuries instead of decades, accumulating knowledge and influence that would be impossible in a single human lifespan. Where the wealthy can purchase not just comfort, but immortality itself. She paused for effect, letting the implications sink in. Tonight, we're offering exclusive rights to this technology. The bidding will begin at $10 billion for primary licensing rights, with additional tiers available for $15 billion, or called a voice with Russian accent, a defense minister whose country had been sanctioned for human rights violations. 18 billion, countered a Chinese attaché representing a government known for disappearing dissidents. 20 billion, said an American general whose face Serafina recognized from news coverage of war crimes investigations. The auction was happening. People were bidding billions for the right to create more victims, to expand the torture that had consumed her life, to turn systematic abuse into an industrial process that would consume thousands or millions. Serafina felt Caden's hand touch hers. Briefly, support, permission, acknowledgement that this was her moment if she wanted to take it. She stood slowly, her movement deliberate and theatrical, designed to draw eyes without seeming aggressive. I have a question, Serafina said, her voice cutting clearly through the excited chatter projected with alpha authority that made people turn instinctively, even though they didn't understand why. Conversations died like someone had thrown a switch. 200 faces turned toward her. Isolde's eyes found her with predatory focus, scanning for threat, not yet recognizing the woman hidden behind mask and wig and makeup. Yes, Isolde said, her voice maintaining professional courtesy, despite the interruption, despite the way her security team was already moving closer to assess the disturbance. And you are? Serafina began, walking down the center aisle, her movements controlled and precise, each step measured for maximum dramatic impact. She reached up with steady hands and removed the masquerade mask, letting it drop to the floor with a clatter that seemed impossibly loud in the sudden silence. Then she pulled off the wig, dark hair spilling free. The crowd gasped, hundreds of people inhaling simultaneously, as recognition rippled through those who'd seen photos in classified briefings, as Isolde's face went from professional courtesy to shock, to fear in rapid succession. That's impossible. Isolde breathed, her perfect composure cracking like ice over deep water hands, gripping the podium hard enough that her knuckles went white. You're dead. I watched you die. I certified your death personally. You've been dead for 3 weeks. Hello, Dr. Cross, Serafina said, reaching the stage and climbing the steps with predatory grace, with the confidence of someone who held all the cards and knew it. Subject 246, reporting for duty. Though you can call me Serafina Ashford, the name my parents gave me before you kidnapped me and spent 5 years turning me into a number. Security, Isolde began, her voice rising with panic, badly disguised as authority. I wouldn't, Serafina interrupted calmly, turning to face the crowd, to face the cameras she knew were recording everything, to face the witnesses who couldn't all be silenced. Because the moment your security touches me, you prove everything I'm about to say is true. The moment you try to silence me with force, you confirm that you have something to hide, something worth killing to protect. So why don't we skip that part and move straight to the truth? She could see Isolde calculating, could practically hear the wheels turning as the doctor tried to find an angle, a way to spin this, a way to discredit the witness standing in front of 200 of the world's most powerful people. This woman is clearly disturbed, Isolde said, recovering some composure, her voice taking on the patronizing tone of a rational adult dealing with an irrational child. Suffering from some kind of psychotic break, she needs medical attention, not a platform for delusions. I don't know who put her up to this disruption, but tell them. Serafina interrupted again, her voice calm but carrying absolute authority that made even alpha wolves in the crowd sit up straighter. Tell them about the 245 subjects who died before me. Tell them about the children you kidnapped from destroyed packs. Tell them about the systematic torture you called research. Tell them about the white rooms and the silver collars and the daily tests that killed most subjects within hours. I don't know what you're talking about, Isolde said, but her voice wavered slightly, her professional mask showing more cracks. Then let me refresh your memory, Serafina said, pulling out a small tablet that Marcos had loaded with documentation. Subject 37, Daniel Reeves, age 16 when you acquired him from Cascade Pack after orchestrating a rogue attack that killed his entire family. Died in 4 minutes during your first attempt at direct wolf blood transfusion. You described his death as instructive in your research notes. She swiped to the next file. Subject 89, Maria Santos, age 19, lasted 3 days before organ failure. You documented her screaming for your audio research on pain tolerance and psychological breaking points. You played that audio during my torture sessions, told me I'd end up like her if I didn't cooperate. Another swipe. Subject 173, Sarah Chen, age 23, lasted almost a month before her organs liquefied. You called her your favorite because she survived long enough to provide extensive data on long-term degradation patterns. With each name, with each detail that only someone inside the program could know, Isolde's face got paler, her composure crumbling further. Evander now, Caden said into his comm device, his voice carrying clearly in the shocked silence. The screens behind Isolde changed. The sanitized footage disappeared, replaced by raw reality, unedited video pulled from Cross Industries' own servers, by Marcus's hackers' footage that Isolde thought was secured behind military-grade encryption footage that showed everything. Children in white cells, injections that made them convulse, bodies transforming but wrong, tearing themselves apart as human and wolf DNA fought at the cellular level. Scientists documenting everything with clinical detachment while subjects screamed. Isolde's voice clinical and cold narrating procedures. Subject 189 expired at 14 minutes. Cause of death catastrophic organ failure due to genetic rejection. Note in record increase immune suppressant dosage by 15% for subject 190. Another video. A girl, maybe 16 years old, strapped to a table, begging, "Please, Dr. Cross, please no more. I'll do anything, please." The needle, the injection, the screaming that went on for hours until it finally stopped. The ballroom filled with horrified silence, broken only by the screams echoing from the speakers, by the clinical documentation of systematic murder, by undeniable evidence of crimes that made war crimes look tame. Someone in the audience vomited. Several people were crying. A general was staring at the screens with an expression of absolute horror, his face pale green, one hand over his mouth. 245 people, Serafina said into the microphone, her voice steady despite tears streaming down her face despite 5 years of trauma crystallizing into this single moment of truth. 245 children and young adults who were kidnapped, tortured, experimented on and murdered, all for Project Genesis. Also Dr. Cross could save her dying husband. Also, you could bet billions on technology built on mass graves. She turned back to Isolde, who looked like she'd aged a decade in the last 5 minutes, whose perfect facade had completely shattered. So please, Dr. Cross, tell these nice people who paid $10,000 per plate for dinner tonight. Tell them how many more subjects you'll need to kill to make this technology profitable. Tell them how many more children will die screaming in white rooms. Tell them the real cost of immortality. The silence was absolute. No one spoke. No one moved. 200 of the world's most powerful people sat frozen watching screens that showed undeniable evidence of systematic torture and murder watching a witness. They couldn't dismiss or discredit because she knew too much, because she carried the scars to prove every word. Then Isolde's face changed grief and fear, transforming into something harder, something desperate, something dangerous. "You don't understand," she screamed, all pretense of professional composure gone, her voice raw with grief and fury and madness that had always lurked beneath the civilized surface. Victor was dying. My husband, the man I love, was dying. And conventional medicine couldn't help him. I have watched him waste away for years, watched him grow weaker every day, watched the light fade from his eyes as his body destroyed itself. What was I supposed to do? Accept it, let him die when I had the knowledge and the resources to save him. She was pacing now, hands gesturing wildly, completely unhinged. Yes, there were losses, regrettable losses, unfortunate losses, but the ends justify the means. Progress requires sacrifice. Every great achievement in human history has been built on the suffering of those who came before. Medical advances, technological breakthroughs, societal evolution. All of it required people willing to make hard choices, willing to sacrifice the few to save the many. By murdering children, Serafina asked quietly, her voice cutting through Isolde's manic speech like a knife. "That's not progress, Dr. Cross. That's evil wearing a lab coat. That's atrocity disguised as research. That's you deciding that your husband's life was worth more than 245 other people's lives and calling that decision science instead of what it really is, mass murder." "I'm a visionary," Isolde screamed, all pretense of sanity gone now. "I'm saving the world. I'm advancing human evolution. And if I go down..." She pulled a remote from her jacket pocket, her hand shaking, her eyes wild. "Then everyone goes with me." She pressed the button. The floor panels around the stage slid open with mechanical precision, revealing hidden compartments beneath. Rising from those compartments on hydraulic lifts were 10 figures that made several people in the audience scream, that made Serafina's wolf snarl with recognition and horror. They had been human once, or wolf. Now they were neither, and both twisted between forms in ways that looked agonizing, frozen in painful transition by failed genetic modification. Bodies too large proportions, wrong patchwork of fur, and exposed muscle and skin that hadn't healed properly. Faces elongated with too many teeth, eyes vacant and feral intelligence gone and replaced with pure animal aggression. These were the failed subjects that Isolde had kept alive, not out of mercy but as emergency weapons, living proof of concept for Project Genesis, insurance policy for scenarios exactly like this. "Kill them," Isolde screamed at her creations, at the monsters she'd made from people who'd once had names and families and futures. "Kill them all." The creatures lunged with impossible speed, years of genetic modification giving them enhanced abilities, even if the modification had destroyed everything else. The ballroom erupted into pure chaos. People screaming, running, trampling each other in panic. Security drawing weapons, but hesitating because there were too many civilians, too many high-value targets, too much risk of hitting innocents. Alphas in the crowd, shifting partially, claws extending, preparing to defend themselves and their mates. Serafina felt her wolf surge with volcanic force, felt the transformation coming whether she wanted it or not, felt power exploding through her system like nothing she'd ever experienced. The shift was instantaneous, faster than should be possible, explosive rather than gradual power, sending visible shockwaves through the airs that made people stagger. The white wolf emerged, and the aura of power around her was overwhelming, not just alpha authority, but something more, something that made even the feral creatures hesitate mid-attack, that cut through their manufactured rage with something older and deeper. Serafina threw back her head and howled. It wasn't just sound. It was power given voice. It was dominance made audible. It was command written into the fabric of reality itself, undeniable and absolute and utterly irresistible to anyone with wolf blood. The feral creatures stopped mid-attack, some frozen in mid-leap, others sliding to confused halts, all of them suddenly uncertain, suddenly recognizing something in that howl that overrode their training and conditioning and manufactured aggression. One by one, they lowered themselves to the ground, submitting, recognizing the alpha above all alphas, responding to authority that went beyond training or conditioning or genetic modification, responding to something primal and absolute that their wolf DNA recognized even if their ruined minds didn't understand. The ballroom went silent, except for Serafina's panting and whimpering from the subdued creatures, 200 people watching something that shouldn't be possible, watching a woman who'd been tortured for 5 years demonstrate power that transcended what anyone understood about shifter hierarchy. Isolde stared in absolute horror, her face pale gray, her carefully constructed worldview shattering. No, that's impossible. You're just a hybrid, just a test subject, I'm the weapon you created, Serafina said, shifting back to human form with the same explosive speed, standing naked and unbowed in front of everyone, covered in scars that told the story Isolde wanted to hide. You tortured me for 5 years, broke me systematically, tried to reduce me to nothing but a number and a data point, and in the process, you evolved me into something beyond your comprehension. You created exactly what you were trying to create, an enhanced human with wolf abilities. You just never expected that enhanced human would use everything you taught me about pain and power and survival and would turn it all back on you. She took a step forward and Isolde took a step back. So thank you, Dr. Cross. Thank you for making me stronger than I ever would have been. Thank you for teaching me that survival is a choice and power is something you claim rather than something you're given. Thank you for every moment of torture that refined me into this. I am everything you wanted to create, and I'm going to use it to destroy you. Isolde's hand shook as she pulled a syringe from her pocket, the same silver-tinted liquid. Serafina recognized the same formula that had killed her once already. But Isolde didn't aim it at Serafina. She aimed it at her own arm. I'll show you what Genesis was meant to create, she screamed, jabbing the needle into her arm with desperate force. I'll show you perfection. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Isolde's body began to convulse. The transformation started, but wrong horribly, catastrophically wrong. Bones broke but didn't reform properly, fracturing in patterns that made her body fold at impossible angles. Skin split but didn't heal, tearing wider as something tried to emerge. Her screams filled the ballroom in human sounds of agony that went on and on. Her husband, Senator Victor Cross, watching from his wheelchair near the front, let out a broken cry. Isolde, no, what have you done? Oh God, Isolde, please. But Isolde was beyond hearing. Her body was destroying itself, the hybrid serum that had killed 245 others, now killing her too, proving that the research had never worked, that all the torture and murder had been for nothing, that perfection was impossible, and the pursuit of it had cost everything. Serafina could have let her suffer, could have stood there and watched her die slowly over the next minutes or hours, watched her experience a fraction of the pain she'd inflicted on so many others. Instead, she picked up the silver dagger from where it had fallen when she shifted, stepped forward, and drove it through Isolde's heart with surgical precision. Quick, clean, merciful, in a way Isolde had never been to anyone else. It's over, Serafina said quietly, as Isolde's body went still as the screaming finally stopped, as 5 years of systematic torture finally reached its conclusion. The ballroom erupted not with violence, but with action. Media representatives who'd been recording everything were already live streaming to their networks. Alphas were on phones calling for emergency council sessions. Law enforcement was flooding in, having monitored everything from secure locations outside. There would be no covering this up, no burying it in classified files, no national security exemptions that could hide mass murder broadcast live to millions. The Council of Alphas convened an emergency session that night and voted unanimously within the hour. Cross Industries was dissolved, immediately all assets seized and frozen pending investigation. Senator Victor Cross was arrested on 245 counts of murder conspiracy to commit murder, kidnapping, torture and crimes against humanity. His political allies abandoned him within hours. No one wanted to be associated with this scandal. No one wanted their names appearing in the same sentence as systematic child torture. But most importantly, the council voted to fund immediate rescue operations. For every remaining test subject, worldwide voted to create a task force specifically to find and shut down any similar research programs, voted to establish the Ashford Protocol named for Serafina that made experimentation on any shifter without informed consent a capital crime punishable by death. Within 24 hours, FBI and supernatural law enforcement hit all 12 known Cross Industries facilities simultaneously. Coordinated raids across 3 continents. 513 subjects were found alive, some in relatively good condition, others barely surviving. All of them traumatized beyond measure. And in Portland's sub-level 3 in a white room, identical to the one Serafina had occupied for 5 years, they found her. Riven, subject 247, 18 years old, terrified, but alive. When Serafina entered her cell, when they let her be the one to do it because she'd earned that right, had paid for it with 5 years of suffering, Riven looked up with eyes that had learned not to hope that expected cruelty, even from rescue. Sarah, she whispered the name barely audible. But they said you died. They said I came back. Serafina said, tears streaming down her face as she crossed the room and pulled Riven into the first gentle embrace the girl had probably felt in months. I kept my promise. Someone came to save us, and now we're going home. Riven collapsed into her arms, sobbing, and Serafina held her while Caden and the rescue team secured the facility while evidence was collected, while the last vestiges of Cross Industries' evil were finally exposed to light. Spring came to Washington state with gentle insistence, transforming the estate that had once belonged to Senator Victor Cross, seized by the government and sold at auction to Caden Thornfield for $1 in recognition of services rendered to the supernatural community. The sign above the entrance read, Ashford Sanctuary, a haven for hybrid recovery. Serafina stood on the front steps in morning sunshine, watching as another transport van arrived, carrying survivors from the San Francisco facility, the last of the international rescues, completing the liberation of everyone they'd found in Cross Industries' network. She looked different now than she had 3 months ago, still thin but gaining healthy weight, hair thick and lustrous again, eyes bright with purpose instead of dulled by trauma. The scars remained, they always would, but they looked different now, looked like medals earned rather than shame to hide. The sanctuary housed 87 survivors, now from ages 14 to 37, from 17 different packs or no packs at all. Some were healing quickly, others would take years. All of them had hope. 2 weeks ago, Congress had passed the Ashford Act, making experimentation on any shifter of federal crime with mandatory life sentences and no possibility of parole. The UN followed suit within days. 18 countries signed international treaties. 4 countries that refused to sign found themselves subject to economic sanctions that made refusal untenable. It wouldn't bring back the 245 who died, but it would save thousands in the years to come. Sarah Riven emerged into sunlight, healthy and smiling, a transformation from the terrified girl they'd rescued 3 months ago. She'd gained 20 pounds, had color in her cheeks, laughed easily now instead of flinching at every sound. The new arrivals are settling in, medical teams doing intake assessments. Everyone seems stable. Good, Serafina said, pride warming her chest. Riven had become her assistant, her second in command in running the sanctuary, channeling her own recovery into helping others heal. That evening, as the sun set over Washington Forest, the Thornfield pack gathered for the official mating ceremony, the public one they delayed for 3 months, while Serafina healed enough to handle large crowds without panic attacks. Nearly 300 people attended, pack members, rescued subjects, alphas from across the region who had come to witness and celebrate reporters covering what had become the supernatural story of the decade. Under a full moon that hung huge and golden on the horizon, Serafina and Caden stood before the council and spoke their vows. "I was lost," Serafina said, her voice steady and clear, carrying to the assembled witnesses. "Buried in darkness for 1,847 days. You found me, you saved me. You helped me remember I was more than what they tried to make me. You helped me become something more. You gave me safety when I'd forgotten what safety felt like. You gave me love when I'd forgotten I deserved it. You gave me purpose when I thought survival was all I had left." She took his hands, looked into eyes that had first seen her dying in mud and rain and had chosen to save her anyway. "You helped me transform pain into power. Helped me build this." She gestured to the sanctuary, to the survivors watching, to the hope that had grown from suffering, from ashes and trauma. "You helped me prove that broken things can heal, that victims can become survivors, that one person's choice to care can change everything." "When I thought I was rescuing you," Caden replied, his voice rough with emotion. He'd never been comfortable showing publicly, but showed now anyway because she deserved his vulnerability as much as his strength. "But you saved yourself. I just provided backup. You took everything they did to you, 5 years of systematic torture designed to break you, and transformed it into strength, into purpose, into justice for hundreds, into a sanctuary that proves healing is possible even from the worst trauma. I was just honored to witness your transformation, honored to love you through it, honored to call you my mate, my partner, my equal in all things." They sealed the bond with a kiss that felt like promise and benediction, simultaneously, with a run through the forest afterward. Black Wolf and White Wolf racing together under moonlight, two survivors who'd found each other in darkness and chosen to build something beautiful from shared trauma. Later that night, as dawn broke over the sanctuary, they stood on the mountain overlooking their territory. Below, 513 people were learning to be survivors instead of victims, were learning that life after trauma was possible, were learning that their suffering could have meaning if they chose to give it meaning. "Do you ever regret it?" Caden asked quietly, his arm around her shoulders, watching sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. "If you could go back and erase those 5 years, change history, so you were never taken, never tortured, never had to endure any of it, would you?" Serafina was quiet for a long moment, thinking about the question seriously instead of giving the easy answer. Finally she spoke. "No," she said, and meant it with absolute certainty. "Those 1,847 days made me who I am, made me strong enough to survive, made me wise enough to recognize suffering in others, made me capable of building this." She gestured to the sanctuary below. "Because I understand what these people need in ways no one who hasn't experienced it could understand. The suffering had meaning because I chose to give it meaning, because I chose to transform pain into purpose, because I chose to use my experience to prevent others from suffering the same way." She turned to face him fully. "The greatest warriors aren't born strong, Caden. They're forged in fire, tempered by pain, defined by the choice to rise rather than break. I was broken, shattered into pieces, so small I thought I could never be whole again. But I chose to rise. I chose to fight. I chose to become more than what they tried to make me. And that choice to reclaim my power, to reclaim my identity, to reclaim my future, that defines me more than anything the crosses ever did." They broke subject 246, but Serafina Ashford, they created her, and she's going to make damn sure their evil dies with them. "Then you're the greatest warrior I've ever known," Caden said with absolute conviction, pulling her closer. Serafina smiled, leaned into her mate, watched the sun rise over a world that was because of her choices. Just a little bit safer, a little bit kinder, a little bit more just. She had been subject to 46 for 1,847 days. A number, a thing, a commodity valued only for what could be extracted from her body. But she was Serafina Ashford forever. A name, a person, a warrior who had transformed suffering into salvation, who had turned torture into testimony, who had become living proof that the human spirit, that the shifter spirit, could not be destroyed by cruelty, only refined by it. And she was finally truly completely free. Behind her the sanctuary was waking. Rescued subjects beginning their days of healing. Therapists arriving for sessions. Medical staff preparing for treatments. Volunteers showing up to teach skills or provide support, or just sit with people who needed to know they weren't alone. Life continuing, hope growing, justice manifesting in concrete action instead of abstract ideals. "Come on," Serafina said to Caden, taking his hand. "We have work to do, more subjects to help heal, more laws to influence. There's a Senate committee next week about international agreements on genetic research. More people to reach. The war isn't over just because we won one battle. There are other victims waiting. Other facilities might exist that we haven't found. Other people who need to know that rescue is possible, that healing is real, that they're not alone." "Then let's get to work," Caden agreed, matching her stride as they walked back down the mountain toward the sanctuary, toward the day's responsibilities, toward the future they were building together. Together, Serafina confirmed the word, carrying the weight of promise and commitment and partnership forged through shared purpose. And as the sun rose fully over Ashford Sanctuary, as 246 survivors began another day of healing and growing and reclaiming their lives, as justice continued to manifest in the real world through concrete actions and systemic changes. Subject 2, 46's story finally truly ended, but Serafina Ashford's story warrior, survivor, founder, leader mate, that story was just beginning, and she would make sure her existence meant something more than just survival. She would make sure it meant hope.